Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we drift gently, very gently, into a time where breakfast could legally qualify as a weapon, bathing was treated with the same caution as witchcraft, and a misplaced bucket could become a village-wide humanitarian disaster. You're traveling back to the 14th century, a place where everything you consider normal either doesn't exist or is considered heresy. You might not survive this. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I like knowing which part of the planet is being gently traumatized together. Now soften the glow, set a gentle breeze in motion, and let's drift into tonight's tale together. You open your eyes. Not because you've had enough sleep, but because the straw beneath your back just moved, and you're fairly sure it wasn't you. There's no blanket, no bedsheet. There's a piece of cloth that smells like smoke and the sweat of 3 generations. And a pillow, if you count a forge-wiping rag stuffed with straw as a pillow. The wind slips through the cracks in the mud wall, not cool, just enough to stir the cool despair left over from the night before. The first smell that hits you isn't dew or wildflowers. It's a trio of scents, feet, turnips, and poor decisions. A chicken is standing on your stomach. It's looking at you like it's collecting rent for the coop. In the corner, your grandfather is coughing, not because he's sick, but because he always coughs at 4 a.m. like a cursed alarm clock. You lie there, listening to bedbugs gnaw on the straw like a duet for clarinet and silent suffering. You try to roll over, and the sound your back makes is like someone cracking the joints of a haunted wooden puppet. You wonder, what day is it? No one knows. No one cares. Calendars are a luxury reserved for nobility and clergy. For you, there are only 2 types of days: work days and work days with rain. Outside, the sun isn't fully up yet, but it's already pouring a yellowish light onto the roof, not the warm gold of fairy tales, but the kind of yellow that reminds you of reused cooking grease. You haven't eaten, but your stomach is already banging the war drums like it's planning an uprising. Somewhere in your mind, a small hopeful voice suggests that maybe today there will be fresh bread. But then you remember, yesterday, Grandma scraped mold off the bread to use as yeast, which means today's bread is still the same one, just slightly less moldy. You sit up slowly, like if you move too fast, the universe will notice you're still alive and assign you more chores. A rat scurries past your feet. It looks healthier than you, and you think, this is the beginning of a perfectly normal day. Normal by 14th century standards, which means you're not dead, not arrested, and haven't been mistaken for a witch. So, let's call it a lucky start. You wake up for the 3rd time, first because of your grandfather's coughing, second because the chickens were fighting indoors, and this time because a small damp creature is lying on your face, and you sincerely hope it's just a rat. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, but the early light is already sneaking through the thatched roof like rough fingers poking into your eyes, not to wake you, but to remind you that today will be terrible too, just in a completely new way. You're not wearing pajamas. The Middle Ages had no concept of sleepwear. There were only clothes, and you wore them always. Work by day, sleep by night. If your clothes smelled, it meant you were still alive. If they didn't, then you were either dead or a noble, and in either case, you didn't belong here. You raise your hand to wipe your face. It feels like cleaning the surface of an old loaf of bread lightly clawed by a cat, thanks to the mix of dust, sweat, straw, and something you swear could be dried dung. Next to you is your mother, sleeping upright because her back hurts. Farther away is your father, snoring like a man who swallowed a bellows. A few steps beyond, your younger sibling, still wrapped in a damp cloth, is dreaming of milk, or of not having to sleep on splintered wooden boards. You exhale, your breath thick like the soup your family made last month, and it smells like a potato forgotten in the cellar through 2 winters. You don't brush your teeth. No one does. Not because they don't want to, but because they don't know that cavities aren't a punishment from God. They believe toothaches are natural, like hunger or death. You sit up. The straw mat beneath you sighs in relief, like it's just been released after 3 months of forced service under you. The goat and a bucket of ash. There's no wooden floor. The ground is dirt. When it's dry, it cracks. When it's wet, it's slick. And it always clings to your feet like a destiny you can't escape. You shuffle toward the door, careful not to step on the rat. It's sleeping soundly, and honestly, looks cleaner than you. There are no rooms in the house. Just one big space, divided by objects. The bed is where the straw is. The kitchen is where the smoke is. The toilet is non-existent. But we'll get to that in the next chapter. For now, you need to go outside, breathe, and hope no one drags you back in within the first 10 minutes. You push open the wooden door, which used to be a good door, until termites turned it into abstract art, and step outside. The morning breeze hits your face, cold as truth, carrying the scent of firewood, horse manure, and the hope that burned out last night. You yawn, but not too wide, afraid the air will tear your cracked lips. A chicken flies over your head. It seems busy, or panicked, or both. You don't ask why. This world doesn't answer questions. You walk to the water barrel by the house. Not to wash your face, you wouldn't waste water on such luxury, but to check if there's any water left. Good news, there is. Bad news, it's turned a light tea color, and 3 unidentified creatures are swimming in circles like they're doing yoga. You splash some on your face. It's cold, very cold, like being slapped by your ancestor's damp hand. Your face wakes up, but your mind is still struggling to understand why you were born in an era without soap. You look down at your feet, bare, cracked, long past feeling the difference between earth, mud, and rotting wood. You own a pair of shoes, but only one. The other was stolen by the village dog last winter and never returned. You're still waiting for an apology. At this point, the neighbors are waking up. The old lady next door is sweeping her yard with a bundle of tied straw. Not because it's dirty, but because she needs an excuse to chase the chickens away from the turnips. Children start screaming, not from joy, but because it's the most effective way to communicate in a village without doors. You take a deep breath, not to relax, but to load up on enough oxygen for the morning ahead. And you tell yourself, I'm okay. I'm alive. I haven't had my brain eaten by bedbugs. I haven't slipped into the poop bucket. And in the 14th century, that's considered a smooth start. You go back inside, your hands still wet, your feet still caked in dirt, and your mind not entirely present. In the kitchen, which is just a corner with a cold hearth and a pot so black it looks like it once cooked souls, your mother is building a fire. She's using dried turnip skins, rotting straw, and a scrap of bread left over from last Easter. You don't ask why it hasn't molded. You suspect it passed that phase and is evolving into a new form of consciousness. Your sibling wakes up, starts screaming, then laughing, then screaming again. You understand that's how you feel about life too. Except you're too tired to scream. From a distance, a horn blares. Not an instrument, someone screaming after stepping on a thorn. That's life, starting with a cough, interrupted by rats, and punctuated by human screams caused by nature. You take a sip of weak beer diluted with water, not because you like it, but because it's safer than the well. Then you stand still for a moment, watching the light pierce through the thatch like golden threads trying to stitch together the truth that you're still here, still not dead. And this morning, that is, just enough. There's one thing you need to understand right now, if you didn't already get it while lying on the straw. In the 14th century, going to the toilet was not private, not pleasant, and absolutely not something you could hold until you got home. Because what you called home didn't have a toilet. It had a dark corner, a wooden bucket, and a silent prayer that no one would walk in while you were reflecting. You need to go. Yes, the kind of need that cannot be postponed. Not because yesterday's meal was suspicious, though it was, but because the menu was something in the pot, and now your body is renegotiating its terms of existence. You glance around the house. No back door, no curtains, no private room. Just the sympathetic look from your mother, who understands someone's about to carry the bucket, and that someone is you. You pick up the wooden bucket. It used to be an apple bin, then a coal bucket, and then, well, you'd rather not remember, and head out back. There's a bush there, and a fragile hope that no one else is using it. The neighbors share it. So do the chickens. One time you saw a cat walk out of it looking deeply changed. You step lightly across the damp earth. Each step makes a squelching noise, like the ground is trying to reject your presence. The early wind is still cold, but this time it doesn't make you shiver. It just helps you feel every muscle clenching in physiological despair. You reach the bush. No one's there. A small morning miracle. But there's nothing to sit on. No seat, no lid. Just gravity, instinct, and your ability to hover. You lower yourself, or rather, float in an unnamed position, a rustic form of medieval yoga, and hope for the best. Your eyes look out toward the fields, where the sun is timidly sneaking across the sky like a guilty child. The wind slips through the grass, through your hair, carrying the scent of ash, smoke, and now, your contribution. You hear footsteps. Someone's approaching. You cough, not because you're sick, but because it's the villagers' code for, someone's here. Please choose another bush. The person pauses, then turns away. The unspoken rule is honored. There are moments in life when humans rise above their instincts, and this is one of them. You exhale, and then exhale again, because breathing is the only thing you can still control. Finished. You stand up, a simple act. But in the 14th century, it's both athletic and spiritual. No toilet paper, no running water. There's moss. There are leaves. And if you're lucky today, a soft chunk of dry dirt. You do what needs to be done. You don't think about it. Thinking would destroy your faith in humanity. You return, bucket in hand, soul hollow. The sun has risen a bit more, casting light on the dirt path like it's patting your back and saying, "Well done, you're still alive." You place the bucket beside the house. No one asks. No one looks. Everyone in the village knows. Some things are best left alone. That's how you survive in a community with no sewage system, but an exceptional collective memory for forgetting. You wash your hands, not with soap, because there isn't any, but with ash water. It doesn't clean, but at least makes you feel like you're doing something. Like praying while sinking. Not effective, but comforting. Each village has its own system. Some have shared latrines, usually at the edge of town, next to the cemetery. A placement that makes you reflect deeply on the cycle of life and afterlife. Some have trenches. Some dump straight into the river. That same river, later used to rinse vegetables, and drink, and wash faces. Some call it a cycle. You call it unavoidable. Sometimes you dream of a small room with a door lock, clean water, and the gentle flush of a heart-playing toilet. But then you remember, you're living in an age where bathrooms are the privilege of God and royalty, and you're just someone who smells. Strangely, despite everything, you feel relieved. Not just physically, but because you've completed one of the most basic human functions under conditions no one should have to endure. And you survived. You return to the house, just as your younger sibling throws a turnip at the wall and yells, "My turn!" Somewhere deep inside, you know you're no longer the only one who needs to go. You look up at the sky, see clouds drifting slowly. The wind still blows, the smell still lingers, but your heart, oddly enough, feels light. Because no matter how cruel, how filthy, how raw and absurd the Middle Ages may be, at least today, you've started your morning with a little peace. And in this context, that's not a small thing. You think you're ready for breakfast, for a tender moment in the day, a small comfort, where the body is nourished and the soul is soothed by something warm, soft, and legally swallowable. But then you step into the kitchen, which is also the bedroom, the turnip storage, the chicken coop, and the only place with a roof, and realize that in the 14th century, breakfast isn't a promise, it's a test. At the center of the kitchen, in a blackened pot caked with soot like it was dragged from hell through a drainage canal, is the pottage, a dish that could generously be translated as porridge, or more accurately, as the result of boiling whatever can be boiled, on whatever day it can be boiled, until time and fire compromise into something simultaneously thick, runny, and technically a substance. You don't know what's in the pot. No one does. Not even the cook, your mother, who merely shrugs. There are turnips for sure, beans, something that once resembled meat, though now its allegiance to animal or plant is unclear. Possibly a snail, possibly disappointment. You look at your bowl, wooden, cracked along the rim, formerly used by your father to mix manure, and wonder where you went wrong in the cosmic cycle of rebirth. To end up eating breakfast with a tin spoon and reluctant gratitude. You scoop a spoonful of pottage. It slides down slowly like it regrets leaving the pot, leaving behind a glossy brown trail along the bowl, like the oily stain of a soul leaking out of a decomposing corpse. You blow on it. It's still hot, not pleasantly warm hot, more like don't let it touch your skin hot. You take a bite. It has no flavor, but it does have a smell. Smoke, rotten roots, oversalted sorrow, and the ghost of expired decisions. You chew. Unnecessary, but it makes you feel like you're taking part in something active, like nodding while someone explains philosophy. You don't understand it, but it's polite. Children around you eat too. No complaints. They're used to it. They've grown up on this, as though they were weaned on survival instinct mixed with bean paste and cabbage water. One of them wipes the bowl with their fingers, eats more. Not from hunger, but because if they don't finish, Grandma will look. That look has no sound, no words, just a warm weight of disappointment that sits in your chest for the rest of the day. There's bread, or rather a former bread-like object, dry, gray, heavy as brick and sharp as a whetstone. You tap it against the table. The sound is like a hammer on the coffin of joy. You bite it, instantly regret it. Your gums scream in silence. A tooth wobbles, as if drafting its resignation letter. But you chew anyway, because this is bread, a real food, a symbol of abundance, even if it feels like a consolation prize in a game you never asked to play. There's salt, a pinch. Every family guards salt like gold. You see your mother sprinkle a tiny bit, so tiny you suspect it's ceremonial, into the remaining pottage for lunch. Everyone nods. No one speaks. But inside everyone knows. Today is special. Today there's salt. Some days there's nothing. On those days, pottage is just watery turnip broth. You once thought vegetable rinse water was the lowest culinary point. Then you ate nearly water stew and realized how naive you were. Each spoonful is a vow, an admission, that you live in a time where fullness matters more than flavor, where eating isn't for joy, but for not dying, where every meal is you sitting before the black pot saying, "Yes, I choose to continue." And somewhere between the fourth and fifth spoon, you feel something strange, not appetite, but peace. Because you're not dead. You have something to chew. You have a table to place your bowl on. A mother, a sibling, smoke from the hearth, and the sound of chickens. Life, under its layers of dust and hardship, is still happening, still simmering, still smelling, not quite rotten, just real. You finish the rest. Wipe your spoon on your sleeve, not to clean it. The sleeve's filthy anyway, and who cares anymore? You look at the pot. There's still some left, which means you'll eat it again at lunch. Possibly the same dish. Possibly a different one. Possibly because someone accidentally dropped something in. But either way, you'll eat, and you'll live. At least until evening. You stack your bowl atop the pile of unwashed ones. A pile that, according to communal memory, has been around since 3 harvests ago, and then sit down, doing nothing, just listening to your stomach settle like a dog that stopped barking because it knows its master has nothing left to give. Your mother flips the pot, adds water. Maybe she's prepping for lunch. Maybe she's just trying to keep it from burning. No one asks. No one speaks. In the kitchen, there's only the gentle scrape of spoon against wood, the wind threading through the door cracks, and a thought drifting through your head like a soft breeze. I'm still here. And in this century, that alone is a miracle. You stand before the only outfit you own, not in a closet, not folded, not smelling of spring meadows, but crumpled in a heap on a three-legged stool by the hearth, shaped like a creature defeated by life, and now pretending to be dead just to avoid being worn one more time. It's a coarse wool tunic, brownish-gray like post-rain turnip wash water, with the texture of a chewed-up sack and a scent that, if you've ever inhaled a blend of 3 seasons sweat, damp wood smoke, and the raw will to survive, then yes, you've grasped the essence of 14th century fashion. You lift it. It's heavy, not from thickness, but from all it has lived through with you. Mud-drenched winters, windless summers, plowed autumns, straw-scraping springs. Every stain is a memory, a story. A clear indication that laundry was not high on history's to-do list. You put it on, not gracefully, not comfortably, just inevitably. The wool scrapes against your skin like a list of reminders that human flesh was never meant to touch unprocessed fibers. It itches. It suffocates. It retains heat so well you could boil emotionally just by standing in the sun for 10 minutes. And the pants? Well, if you're lucky, you have a pair. If not, you have a cloth wrap around your waist, called braise, which looks like someone sewed together old curtains and asked you to trust the process. No zippers, no buttons, just string and patience. All of it's held together by something called a girdle, essentially a magical rope that turns anyone into a human sausage by cinching tightly around the waist. If you're a woman, condolences. Add a heavy skirt, a thick apron, and in colder months, an overcoat roughly the weight of ancestral trauma, topped with a hood large enough to double as a tent. You don't wear underwear. No one does. If you do, it's a sign that you're either wealthy, eccentric, or both, and in either case, people will whisper that you're a witch. You put on your shoes if you have any. Leather, no sole, no lining, no waterproofing, no arch support. Their sole function is to remind you that something is between your foot and the earth, even if that something is damp, moldy, and cracking like morals during a witch trial. Every step is a prayer. You pray the sole doesn't fall off. You pray your feet don't swell. You pray the cobbler, who clearly made these during an existential crisis, doesn't live nearby, because you have things to say. Clothes have no color. Color is privilege. Brown, gray, beige, gray or darker brown. Brown like sadness, that's your palette. If you see someone in bright green, run. They're either nobility, insane, or an actor at the fair. In any case, not someone you're allowed to make eye contact with. You don't wash your clothes weekly, not monthly, possibly not seasonally. Washing is a luxury. Washing means clean water, soap, time, and a belief that life might improve. You have river water, ash, rocks to beat the fabric like it owes you something. But after 3 slaps, you realize you're just mad at yourself for even thinking about laundry. Children wear nothing, or things smaller than the average adult's sense of self-respect. They run around, filthy as your feet, but somehow joyful, perhaps because they haven't yet learned that one day they'll have to wear what you're wearing now. During festivals, you wear your nice clothes. Nice means less stained, or something someone recently died in. You don't pick a size, the size picks you. If the shoulders are too tight, you lower your posture. If the sleeves are too long, you tuck your arms. If it doesn't fit, you call it style. You once dreamed of owning a hat, a feathered one, embroidered, but you wake up to find a rag on your head, or nothing, and learn that dreams are the lightest things to blow away when the morning wind cuts through your village. But then you look around, everyone is like you, dirty, old, itchy. Self-respect stitched together with rough thread and resignation. No one is beautiful. No one is elegant. There's only survival, and survival requires wearing something. You straighten your tunic. Wipe your hands on it, because where else? You take a breath. It smells of old sweat, smoke, and turnip. Familiar. The scent of continuity. and you step out the door. Not stylish, not fashionable, but with something resembling dignity, worn, wrinkled, and still slightly covered in dirt. There's a truth you need to accept before continuing this journey. Privacy in the 14th century wasn't just rare, it was suspicious. The idea of my space was a modern luxury at best and a questionable eccentricity at worst, like eating soft-boiled eggs or wearing pants without tying them to your ankles. You live in a hut with relatives, near relatives, someone you just met yesterday, people whose bloodline is questionable, one emotionally unstable goat, and a colony of flies. Not just ordinary flies, but medieval flies. Creatures of resilience, stubbornness, and an inexplicable obsession with your eyeballs. They don't just visit to sniff your soup or sip your nose drippings, they live here. They are official residents. They have plans, schedules, committee meetings. They reproduce with such alarming speed, it's clear they're in a contest with rats to see who can make humanity lose its mind first. Bad news. The flies are winning. You swat them with your hands, with cloth, with raw willpower. The more you swat, the more they return, as if you summoned them with an ancient ritual. You're half convinced that every time you nap, the flies gather on your face to discuss land rights. The stench? Oh, the smell is its own entity in the village. The smell of livestock dung, of wet mud, of stagnant rainwater trapped in wood crevices for 3 days, of food that used to be food 3 days ago, and the smell of people. Not the poetic human warmth kind praised in modern literature, but the kind that suggests your soul's been lightly roasted in a clay oven and left under the sun. You get used to the smell, because if you don't, you go insane. And insanity is a luxury reserved for nobles and monks. There are no glass windows in the house. There are holes. The wind moves through them. It brings dust, bugs, leaves, and sometimes flecks of dried manure from the village ox stall, because medieval wind had a personality. It didn't just blow, it took charge. It decided what you'd smell, how many times you'd sneeze, and whether your laundry would still be on the line or halfway to the next parish. When you need to be alone, you can't be. There are no private rooms, no boundaries. Wherever you go, someone's already there. You sit, there's a chicken. You stand, there's a dog. You lie down, someone asks, "What are you doing there?" Not out of curiosity, but because that corner is where turnips are dried, eggs are laid, lamps are lit, or where the neighbor's ancient cat chose to die in silence. You once tried crawling into the woodshed behind the house to find some privacy, only to have a 45-minute conversation with the old woman next door who was drying pig hooves and telling you about her late husband, who died falling into a vat of fermenting fish sauce. You didn't ask why he fell in. You just nodded and hoped she wouldn't notice you were clutching a water bucket and trying to avoid all forms of interaction. There is no personal space, and that comes with consequences. There is no personal emotion either. You feel sad, but have no space to be sad. You get angry, but nowhere to scream without children gathering around like it's puppet theater. So you learn to swallow it, like you swallowed breakfast porridge, and the shame of your stretched-out wool tunic, and the fly now napping on your nose. Everything touches everything. People touch people. Smells touch smells. Eyes fall on places no one wants them to. You learn to pretend you don't hear the moan from the corner. Maybe someone's dreaming, or being bitten by rats. You don't ask. You don't intervene. In this world, the highest form of respect you can offer is ignoring it. You once dreamed of a quiet room, with thick walls, a soft bed, a door that closes, and a candle just for you, but dreams are dreams. You still wake up with someone's elbow on your face, and a fly chanting ancient hymns in your left ear. And yet, strangely, it begins to not feel so bad. Because in all this chaos, there's life. There's the laughter of poor children who don't yet know they're poor. There's the clink of bowls, like an old familiar melody. There's your mother scolding your father in that steady voice. The kind of scolding that only needs a smile and a scratch on the head in response. You are not alone. You are part of a living block, dirty, cramped, smelly, but warm. A warmth not measured by temperature, but by the presence of others who are struggling like you, itching like you, swatting flies like you, and still smiling. You learn to breathe through your mouth, not from suffocation, but because your nose is on strike. You learn to observe without staring, to listen without replying, to exist without occupying space. And in that rare moment, when the flies grow tired, the people fall silent, the wind finally rests, and night tiptoes in, you lie down beside everything you once thought you couldn't endure, and whisper one simple thing: I'm still here. You begin your workday not with an alarm bell, not with a reminder email, but with the sound of someone's footstep passing your face and the scratch-scrape of a hoe hitting the soil, like it's scratching the back of some ancient beast slumbering beneath the fields since the age of myth. There are no working hours. There is light, there is land, there is work. You start as soon as it's bright enough to tell your foot from the dog's, and you stop only when it's dark enough that you're no longer sure whether you're planting seeds or burying something. And if you're hoping for the weekend, condolences. That idea won't be invented for several more centuries, along with the quaint notion that workers are allowed to breathe. You carry your hoe out to the field. It's not sharp, not balanced, not made with cutting-edge tech, just hand-forged iron on a wooden handle gnawed by termites, as if it was designed specifically to test the structural integrity of your spine with every swing. Your hands blister. Your shoulders burn. The back of your neck stiffens like someone poured glue into it overnight. The soil doesn't cooperate. It's dry, cracked, hardened like the heart of a man who once dreamed of knighthood and now spreads manure for turnips. You drive the hoe down, and the earth makes a dull thump, like an exhale buried since the previous century. You continue. Rhythmic, repetitive, not out of joy, but because if you don't work, you starve. And if you starve, you die. And if you die, well, you're not emotionally ready to process that part yet. The sun rises, not cheerfully, not gloriously, just hot. It glares down on your neck like a minor god checking whether you're faking it. You sweat, not a few drops, but fully, continuously. Sweat soaks your shirt, then your pants, then drips to the ground, which you're trying to water with your labor. But now it's also getting a generous splash of liquid despair. Someone works beside you, old Hans. A man with hands the size of frying pans and eyes that haven't seen hope since the previous king's reign. He works without pause, without complaint, without speech. Just breathes heavily when the wind changes. You think he once had dreams. Now he has a hoe, a bad back, and a cow that refuses to walk in a straight line. You till, you sow, you collect rocks, you carry water. You work like you are part of an ancient, invisible machine, one that doesn't produce profits, doesn't pay wages, but does steadily convert your body into a second farming tool. Midday comes. You don't have lunch at a little cafe, don't sip iced tea, don't sit under a fan with a podcast. You sit under a bush if you can find one, or under your own shadow if you're skinny enough. You eat old bread, the same bread from yesterday. With a new patch of mold, you tear that part off. Give it to the chicken. The chicken looks at you like it's judging you back. You drink water from a leather flask, warm like soup, scented like last month's sweat. You drink not out of thirst, but because if you don't, you'll faint. And if you faint, you'll get scolded, because fainting is, technically, a form of inefficiency. Some days you work in rain, some in snow, some in winds so strong you tie your shirt around your waist to keep your dignity from blowing away. And each time you bend to pull weeds, you think, if only I'd been born a weed. No clothes, no farming, no literacy. And if someone pulls me up, at least it means I was alive. Work isn't a choice, it's an identity. Those who don't work go hungry, and hunger is an unforgiving curse. No aid, no mental health days. You work, you eat. You don't. You get flies. You once dreamed of becoming a craftsman, like the blacksmith, standing beside the flames, hammering steel into something more tangible than a hole. But then you saw his hands, calloused like iron fish scales, hair singed, eyes permanently red from smoke. and you realized every job turns you into stone in its own way. The only differences are the smell of the smoke and the depth of the burns. Evening comes. You're still working. The sun slips toward the horizon, soft like someone pulling a giant ox-hair blanket across the earth. You stop not because the work is done, but because your eyes can't see and your bones can't bear weight. You drag yourself home, hands trembling, legs numb, and your back folded like it's been pre-packed for storage. You don't complain. No one would listen. No one has time to. Everyone hurts. Everyone's tired. Everyone knows that tomorrow will begin where today's pain didn't finish. And you smile. Not because you're happy, but because, at least, no one fell into the well today. No one got gored by the ox. No one forgot to secure the roof and collapse the kitchen. Today was just a work day. Another day, another slow breath in the long, dragging song of a century that never tires but never rests. You lie down on the ground, eyes closed. In your ears, the sound of the hoe still echoes. Not because someone's still working, but because your brain has learned to re-chew that noise like your stomach re-chews turnip porridge. And you think, quietly, without complaint, that if tomorrow is the same as today, you might survive one more day. You wake up, and she's already been awake. There's no alarm clock, no phone buzzing under her pillow, only the familiar sound of footsteps, light as wind, steady as fate, and the scent of ash from the hearth that somehow came to life before anyone noticed. You lie still, pretending not to be awake, not out of laziness, but as a habitual defense, because you know that the moment you open your eyes, you'll see her and see everything already done before you even thought about it. She has no title, no nameplate. No one calls her the chief executive officer of the household. She's just mother, or wife, or someone's sister. A slender shadow that moves noiselessly among the weight of 1,000 nameless tasks, each as heavy as a plow, as sharp as a wood-cutting axe, and as endless as a winter without bread. She starts the fire, not with a lighter, not with gas, not with hope, but with rotting straw, leftover coal, and 2 hands that have flipped so many turnips they've learned to speak the language of fire. She sweeps the yard, not to clean it, but to keep the chickens at bay. She hauls water from the well, not once, but 10 times. And each time she goes, she returns, without complaint, as though the steps were carved just for her feet, and the wooden bucket were an extension of her shoulder blade. Breakfast doesn't appear like magic. It appears because of her hands. The porridge was stirred while it was still dark. The bread was warmed on hot stones from the night before. If today there's an onion, it's because she spent the evening slicing it, carefully, so the whole house wouldn't start sneezing in unison from a scent more potent than betrayal. After the meal, she doesn't rest. She never rests. She does the laundry, using cold water, ash, and faith that old stains eventually forget how to cling. She mends clothes, not 1, but 4. Her husband's, her son's, the toddler's, and the neighbor's child whose mother went off to help deliver a baby. She keeps cooking, another pot, for lunch, for the sick, for those returning from the fields. She soothes children, not 1, but an entire generation sprouting teeth and demanding bread. She tends the garden, pulls weeds, spreads manure, chases off chickens, chases off dogs, sometimes chases off people, especially those who dare enter the kitchen without washing their feet. She doesn't hit. She doesn't scold. She only looks, and that look is powerful enough to make a turnip crawl back into the soil out of shame. Someone once asked, what was women's work back then? And the answer is, everything men didn't have time to do, didn't think to do, or did wrong. It wasn't fair division. It wasn't a choice. It was law. An invisible social gravity that pulled every responsibility into a woman's hands, then left without instructions. At noon, she doesn't nap. There's a child crying, a fire to tend, seeds to dry, fermenting rice wine to flip. She eats by picking leftovers from the pot, using a chipped wooden spoon no one else touches because everyone knows that's her spoon. No one says it, but everyone understands. Just like everyone understands that if she falls ill, the house will collapse. Not with a crash like a castle, but silently, like a wooden chest whose legs have been eaten away by termites. In the afternoon she knits, not for pleasure, but to prepare for winter. To make sweaters for the little ones. To barter for pork fat from the neighbors. To gift to a cousin who just gave birth. To have something called a nice thing in case a guest comes. She saves every strand of yarn, every stitch, every moment of daylight before the sun steals all color from the cloth. At night, she tidies, washes the dishes, reinforces the roof, plugs the door gaps. She doesn't ask who'll help tonight, because she knows no one has time. Everyone is tired, and so is she. But the difference is, she's still standing. Some nights you see her sitting alone, staring into the embers, not speaking, not moving, not crying, not sleeping. You ask, "What are you thinking?" She smiles, just waiting for the coals to cool. But you know the coals have already cooled, and she's simply savoring 10 minutes when no one needs her, no one calls, no one screams "Mom." To be just a woman, not carrying, not lifting, not holding, not bracing. Just a human being breathing softly in a century full of dust and turnips. Then she rises, walks to her bed, rests her head on a thin arm. No complaints, no resentment, no dreams, only readiness for tomorrow. Another day, just like today, just like yesterday, and she'll still be the one doing it all. You once asked her, "Why don't you take a break?" She didn't respond, not because she didn't hear, but because some questions are like birds flying across the sky, sweet, but they don't help light the fire. You thought she didn't care, but in truth she heard. It's just that her shoulders have carried weight for so long that when they're suddenly free, they feel hollow, as if pain itself reminds her she still exists. Night falls, the children sleep. Her husband snores softly, like an old lullaby. The house is quiet, except for the wind tapping the door and the red glow of the little stove. She sits there, mending a torn corner of a shirt, her eyes not looking at the needle, but through each thread, each weave, toward a place far away, where no one calls, no one needs, no one collapses, and no one asks her to be strong anymore. And then she breathes, gently, ties off the thread, puts the needle away, and stands up. Because tomorrow will come, and she will still rise before everyone. Childhood, in your memory, is a gentle stream of moments. Parks, pastries, and parents chasing after you with panicked eyes just because you stepped off the curb a little too carelessly. But here, in a century cushioned by straw, turnips, and quiet resignation, childhood is an extreme sport played with no coach, no insurance, no time limit, and most importantly, no playground. Children aren't raised like delicate sprouts in a greenhouse. They are dropped straight into the dirt, literally, where they crawl, stand, eat, fall on their own. And if they survive 3 seasons, they are deemed potentially adulthood compatible. You look at a village child, chewing on a chunk of wood, feet sunk in mud, hands gripping the head of a live chicken, and ask, "How old is it?" No one knows. No one remembers. Could be 3, could be 5. Could have been born yesterday but already carries the attitude of someone who survived a flood. There are no toys. Or if there are, they're not called toys. A chewed-up dog bone becomes a sword. A round stone becomes a wheel. A dented pot lid is proudly worn as a helmet. Anything within reach is eligible to become a game, or a weapon, or lunch. No one runs after them to check if they drank enough water, if they fell into a thorn bush, or if they're allergic to pollen. Because here, if your kid falls into a thorn bush, you teach them how to avoid it next time. If they're allergic, you teach them how to sneeze without disturbing adults grinding grain. And if they drink pond water, you just hope they choose the part with fewer snails next time. Kids don't cry when they're hurt. They cry when they're not allowed to follow the adults to the fields. They don't scream because they're dirty. They scream because they're forced to stay home, to watch the baby, the soup, the firewood, the dog, the flames, the soul of a century simmering in a pot of turnip soup. You see one child climbing a tree, not for fun, but to retrieve mom's shirt that flew away in the wind. Another one wades into the river, not to swim, but to fetch the ladle that fell in yesterday. Children here are the junior labor force, a small-scale economic unit. Arms not yet fully grown, but already skilled in carrying a bucket without spilling. Accidents? Of course. Fingers crushed by hammers, ankles twisted running across muddy dikes, eyes reddened by smoke, backs sore from hauling wood. You ask, "Where's the doctor?" Someone laughs. Not because it's funny, but because the doctor is 3 villages away, a week on foot, and doesn't take patients who haven't learned to speak yet. The child sitting beside you has a scar on his forehead, not from a fight, but from trying to push the grain mill last year and getting his head caught under the wheel. The story is retold as a family legend. No tears, just laughter. Remember the day you almost lost an eye? And he laughs. Because he remembers. Because he survived. Because here, scars are medals. There's no school. Or if there is, it's for the rich, the priest's kids, or children of those skilled in flattery. Village children learn by watching, copying, messing up, getting scolded, then doing it again. The only letters they need to recognize are the silhouette of a female goat in the dark and the sound of a pot burning when you forget the lid. You once thought children needed special care, and they do, if you live in a world with lotion, grape-flavored mouthwash, and family physicians. Here, children are cared for with a kind of rugged love, the sort baked through 3 storms, 2 bad harvests, and 1 nameless epidemic. And yet somehow they laugh, loudly, fully, even with missing teeth, even with mud on their noses, even after being smacked with a wooden spoon for spilling the vegetable rinse water. They play hide and seek among piles of dry wood. They reenact battles using straw, wear turnip skins as helmets, and scream like they're commanding the last surviving army in a war between joy and mosquito bites. They compete to see who can catch the most flies bare-handed, and they're proud when they win. At night, they don't need fairy tales. Because every day they live is already a fairy tale, complete with survival trials, unnamed protagonists, and a real-life witch, usually the neighbor lady who keeps saying, "Kids these days are so fragile." You look at them, these children with no coats, no socks, no toothbrushes, and realize they have something you lost a long time ago. The instinct to live without needing a reason. They don't ask why it's like this. They just run, fall, get up, wipe blood on their sleeves and run again. And you think in silence, maybe they're stronger than all of us. You step out of the house, mud on your feet, soot on your hands, mind still foggy from a night spent listening to someone snore like they were trying to reach the spirit world. And the moment the rickety wooden door creaks shut behind you, you realize you've entered a space where everything you've ever done, ever thought, or accidentally revealed while hangry has already been known, remembered, retold, with 3 incorrect details, a touch of added drama, and a raised eyebrow as long as winter. The village. It's not a location, not a community. It's a living organism with collective memory, collective emotion, and a mouth. Many mouths, all very busy. Every step you take is a whisper. Every word you said yesterday is a tale today. And if you ever happen to drop your pants while climbing a roof, sorry. That moment has now become folklore and will be sung in at least 3 different folk styles. No one in the village is a stranger. Everyone knows you from before you had teeth. They remember the festival when you peed in the breadbasket at age 3. They remember how you once sobbed in terror at a goose. They remember how you said you'd grow up to be king, and now you're patching fishing nets. They don't mention it much, just enough for you to know they know. And you never forget. Privacy doesn't exist here, not out of malice, but because there's simply no room for it. Houses are packed tight. Walls made of straw mixed mud, as thin as the character of someone who steals chickens. Voices carry through like the smell of turnip soup, uninvited and unstoppable. You pass by Margrethe, the one who knows everything before it happens. She doesn't eavesdrop, she just senses things. Yesterday, you hadn't even told your mother you had diarrhea from bad mushrooms, and today the whole village is avoiding you like a cursed spirit. And Margrethe hands you a sprig of strange herbs with a smile and a wish. May your intestines come to their senses soon. You thank her, unsure if it's for the miracle or just good manners. The village children are messengers. They run everywhere, ears open, eyes fixed on things adults think are private. They don't understand silence. They don't grasp, don't tell anyone. If you argue with your spouse, rest assured, by morning the kids will reenact the entire exchange on the communal stage, complete with hand gestures and a dramatic flair for the lines you wish you'd never said. Every glance is a dialogue. Every throat clearing is a speech. You learn to listen between the lines. You learn what silence means. Long silence. You're being judged. Silence with a smile. You've been forgiven. Silence with an eyebrow raise. You're about to be rumored to be involved with someone, or someone's goat. Everyone has a role. Some are helpful, but they remind you of it. Some say little, but their gaze pierces. Some always give advice, though they've never done anything right. And some appear only when drama peaks, as if they live underground and surface just in time to nod at the climax. And yet, strangely, in this airless web of who's who and who's part of who, you feel safe. Not the warm bath, jazz, and tea kind of safe. A primitive kind. The kind where if you fall, someone will see. And though they'll retell your fall 3 times, adding 2 more for flair, they will help you up. And they'll scold you, but they'll reach out their hand. The village doesn't forgive quickly, but it doesn't abandon. People will talk behind your back, but they'll sew your shirt when it tears. They'll laugh when you trip, but they'll stand in the wind when you're sick. They'll still call you that kid who poured soup in the stove, but they'll come rebuild your roof after the storm. Here, reputation isn't something you build, it's something you live with. Like a scent, you don't choose it, but if you stay long enough, you learn to make it bearable, or at least less pungent. You once dreamed of somewhere else, a place where you could live without being watched, where you could love without rumors, where you could be quiet without being accused of hiding something. But then you realized, that place doesn't know who you are. No one says your name the right way. No one remembers your father carrying you through the flood. No one knows which tooth your mother lost first. And here, where nothing is private, nothing is secret, nothing is just mine, this is where you feel like you belong. You walk past the town square, where people are still talking about yesterday. They're talking about you. About the chicken you failed to catch. About the time you fell into the well and pretended you were cooling off. You smile. Not out of pride, but because you know they'll keep talking, and they'll keep keeping you, despite everything you've done, been, or bumbled. And in a moment as quiet as a windless afternoon, you exhale, soft, long, and feel accepted. Not because you're good, but because you are a part, an indispensable part, of the tangle they call villager. Sunday morning. You don't wake up because of an alarm. There are no clocks in the Middle Ages, and if there were, they'd be either stolen or used to start dogfights. But because the church bell echoes through the village like a holy slap to your sleepy soul, reminding you that today is not a day of rest, but a day to appear regretful for everything you've done this week, or haven't done but definitely thought about. You get dressed. Not in your best clothes, you don't have any, but in the least moldy ones. A long tunic, tight trousers tied with string, and leather shoes that lost their original shape 3 winters ago. You comb your hair with your hands, splash cold water on your face. Take a deep breath, not to relax, but to brace yourself for the only place that can make you feel both saved and so threatened you'd rather crawl into a turnip patch and live there forever. The church looms at the edge of the village, a block of stone as heavy as the guilt you feel after stealing porridge meant for the sick. Cold stone walls, mossy with age, wooden doors as heavy as a dishonest blacksmith's conscience, and inside, always darker than outside, no matter the time. You push the door open and are immediately swallowed by the smell, a mix of incense, burnt candles, damp wood, and centuries of unresolved fear. You kneel. The stone floor stabs your knees, but you don't dare move. Not out of reverence, but because someone is watching. Someone is always watching. The priest, the widow, God, or a child in training to become their mother's spy. The service begins. The priest's voice rings out, low, slow, drawn out like a funeral horn for your soul. No one dares fall asleep. Or if they do it skillfully, with the neck tilted just so, as if meditating, lips pressed gently like they're in deep repentance. You listen to the sermon. Today's theme is sin. But really, every day's theme is sin. Because in God's calendar, humans have only two states, sinful or about to sin. And if you think you're not sinful, that just proves your arrogance, which is, of course, a sin. You raise your eyes to the painting of the crucifixion, blood, thorns, agony, and eyes staring straight at you as if to say, because of you, I'm like this. You lower your head immediately. Try to think of something pure. But all you can recall is the time you snuck candied plums at a funeral, and that other time you faked a stomachache to get out of grain milling duty. You wonder, will God forgive you? And then you hear the priest say, God forgives those who truly repent. You nod, then hear him continue. But those who do not confess shall burn. You swallow hard. The church is cold, but the back of your neck suddenly heats up. The mass continues. You stand, you kneel, you sit, you kneel again. A cycle of movements eerily similar to aerobic exercise, but with less joy and more knee pain. Someone behind you sneezes. You don't turn around, because if you turn and they turn and your eyes meet, that's already a rumor. Then comes communion. You step forward, slowly, steadily, eyes down, hands on your chest like you've always kept your heart pure, even though last week you called a cow useless because it blocked the road and made you slip into a puddle of pee. You receive the wafer. It's not delicious, dry, thin, flavorless, but you chew it like you're swallowing grace. Maybe you are, maybe it's just flour. But you don't dare overthink it. Overthinking might be a form of pride. After the Mass, everyone leaves. No one talks loudly, no one laughs. They walk softly as if afraid to crack the sacred silence still lingering in the air. But as soon as the church door closes, the atmosphere changes. Did you see her? Wearing red. In church. Yeah, got a bit too close to the priest, don't you think? Margrette's daughter's all grown up. Must be getting married soon. You exhale. It feels like rinsing your soul in cold brine. Painful but clean. At least until next week, when you'll return, kneel, and beg forgiveness for the thought you just had. That the communion wafer was kind of bad. You walk back to the village, not lighter, but something has shifted, like a patched shirt. Not beautiful, but wearable. You didn't fully understand the sermon. You're not sure you've been forgiven. But you know you're not alone. Everyone knelt. Everyone trembled. And everyone hopes that if they believe enough, endure enough, suffer enough, maybe, just maybe, they won't burn. And you smile. Not because you're certain, but because you still hope. And in this century, hope, fragile, tilted, frayed like the edge of a sleeve, is still the one thing that keeps people walking back to church, kneeling and whispering one simple prayer. Please, just today, let me be forgiven. You cough. Just once. Lightly. Absent-mindedly. Maybe it's the straw dust. Maybe it's the smoke from the hearth. Or maybe your throat simply remembered that no one's paid it attention in a while. But the moment that cough escapes, the air around you changes, not by magic, but because the entire village simultaneously turns to look at you like you just confessed to being the root of every calamity since Adam took a bite out of the wrong fruit. No one says anything, but the stares alone make you want to bury yourself in a field and come back as a mute turnip. An old woman coughs too, but differently. The kind of cough that says, "I've been coughing longer than you've been alive," then spits into the dirt and nods, proud to have reasserted her claim over chronic illness. Sickness in the Middle Ages wasn't personal. It was a communal threat, a hovering black cloud, a socially anxious entity named Death, always ready to crawl out of someone's nose after a particularly emphatic sneeze. Every cough was a silent vote on whether you still deserved to live among people or be exiled to the pigsty to await God's verdict. You didn't go see a doctor. There were no doctors, no hospitals, no friendly white coats and name badges. The closest thing was Agnes the healer, who owned a collection of jars filled with herbs, unlabeled animal bones, a dried whale eyeball from some forgotten century, and the ability to cure everything by burning roots and muttering vaguely threatening prayers while pressing her palm to your forehead. She didn't come because you asked. She came because your mother accidentally dropped an onion on her doorstep while passing by. That evening, Agnes arrived. No knock. Just walked in with the bundle of smoking leaves and said in a deep voice, "The scent of death isn't clear yet, but be prepared." You didn't even have time to protest before your chest was plastered with a mix of river mud, mugwort leaves, and blind faith. You were flipped like a fish on a grill, had smoke blown into your face, and heard things like, "If he doesn't wake by morning, well, that's one way to be at peace." You tried to smile, but mostly you were evaluating if you had enough strength left to flee if she started chanting Latin incorrectly. The illness had no official name. It was simply called the strange fever, persistent cough, swollen knees, face turning gray, or the thing that killed your great-grandfather. Diagnoses came with philosophical reasoning. It's because you ate cold food. It's because you skipped church. It's because you looked at a black cat with one eye on a Wednesday. Medicine? Sure. Homemade, plant-based, confidently administered. Boil this leaf. Drink garlic wine. Tape a raw onion to your forehead. Hang charms under your bed. Place a frog on your belly and see if it jumps away or dies right there. If it dies, you're in danger. If it jumps, you're still in danger, but at least the frog survives. If your nose bled, they'd slice your hand to balance your humors. If you felt tired, you'd be given a drink made from tree roots steeped in hard liquor. Then you'd sleep for 3 days and wake up unsure of who you are, but no longer coughing because your body is busy trying to understand why your mouth tastes like smoke-soaked burlap. Death didn't come like it does in the movies. Quick, clean, with background music. It arrived like a heavy quilt layered slowly over you, making you yawn more, move slower, eat less, until you just stopped. And because everyone had seen at least 4 people die from just a cold, no one panicked. They just exchanged glances, sighed, cooked extra porridge, fluffed your pillow, and prepared gentle farewell phrases that wouldn't offend the death spirit lurking outside. But not everyone died. Some recovered, miraculously. Maybe their bodies were strong. Maybe they got lucky. Maybe they ate a certain mushroom that made death too nervous to return a second time. Whatever the reason, they lived on, slightly slower, slightly colder, and always carrying the scent of "I've dodged the scythe," a smell only those who've sweated through 4 damp nights of fever can truly emit. And then you'd see them working again. No rest, no stories. Just quietly, still trembling, still hunched, but with a glimmer in their eyes whenever someone else coughed, because this time, it wasn't them. And they smiled. Because that was enough. You lie there, in the night, listening to the wind hissing through the thatched roof. to Agnes stirring something that smells like turnip broth brewed with resentment. And you think to yourself, if I make it through this, I'll live differently. I'll eat slower. I'll be more thankful. No. You'll still eat too fast, still curse the goat, still forget your hat when it rains, but at the very least, you'll learn to cough more quietly. One of the first things you learn in the 14th century, before letters, lullabies, or how to tie your belt so your pants don't fall, is that death isn't a surprise. It's not an event, it's a baseline, a background process running beneath every daily task, occasionally surfacing as a bell toll, a sob, or the distant thud of a shovel on damp earth. You might be carrying water, chewing on turnip porridge, wringing out a shirt, or mid-sentence saying, "The cow seems odd today." And then someone sighs, bows their head, and simply says, "He's gone." No music, no dramatic collapse, no Greek tragedy wailing. Just a brief silence, then life continues, because the hearth still burns, supper isn't finished, and the soil still needs tilling. The dead aren't embalmed, no makeup, no glossy coffin with velvet lining and scented candles. They're washed with cold water, wrapped in coarse cloth, laid on a wooden board, sometimes the underside of the dining table, due to lack of options, and carried to the graveyard by hand, foot, or a rickety cart, usually reserved for firewood. You might lead the procession, you might follow. But at least once, you'll step over the body of someone who, just yesterday, handed you salt and said, "Don't overdo the soup." You don't ask, what did they die of? The answers are vague. Fever, chill, stomach pain, stroke, or simply, their time came. Here, lifespan isn't measured in years but in winters survived, and anyone who's made it through more than 5 is considered someone who's dodged death a few times unnoticed. Children die, often. No statistics, no data analysis. Just names given and then forgotten, empty cradles burned to ward off bad luck, and mothers who sleep less forever. The elderly die too, but less often than you'd think. Many don't live long enough to be old. And those who do aren't always sure they're glad about it, with bent backs, aching legs, and memories filled with faces now gone. Death doesn't smell like incense. It smells of ash, burnt wood, damp wool, and there's still room in the oven. When digging graves, people don't cry, they measure. Deep enough? Is it sufficient? Any water at the bottom? On rainy days, graves collapse, and bodies resurface as unwelcome reminders. On snowy days, the ground freezes, delaying burials by days. With the deceased temporarily stored in the turnip shed, you might think you'd fear death. But after living amidst cold winds, salty meals, and coughs longer than a church sermon, you find death less frightening than a life with nothing left to do. You once saw an old man, after losing his wife, children, and even the village's oldest chicken, quietly step outside, sit by the well, not crying or speaking, just watching. By morning, he was gone. No one said he took his own life. No one said he despaired. They just said, he left. Nothing held him back. It sounds sad, but also gentle. Like a thread breaking, not from force, but from being worn too long. Funerals aren't farewells. They're roll calls. Who attended, who didn't, who bowed longest, who gazed skyward, who hid their hands behind their back. Everything is noted, not in records, but in collective memory, retold generations later, when a child asks, "Why don't we speak to that family?" You might have hoped to die in your sleep, peacefully, in bed with lullabies. But here, beds are straw, sleep is fleeting, and lullabies are the wind. Death, when it comes, won't ask permission. It enters like a familiar cat, quiet, soft, and unbothered by locked doors. And perhaps that's a mercy, because everyone's tired, everyone's hunched. Everyone has thought, I might not make it through this season. and then they do, and then think it again the next, until they don't have to think anymore. You won't leave much behind. Maybe a spoon, a patched shirt, a story someone misremembers in an amusing way. But you'll leave the most important thing, a small absence, just enough for someone to sigh, cover the hearth, and move on, slightly heavier, but still moving. And that, in this century, is a dignified way to live and to depart. Then you wonder, when you die, not if, but when. Who will remember? Perhaps the child you helped pick up dropped vegetables. Perhaps the dog that only barked at everyone except you. Perhaps the neighbor who once scolded you for breaking a water jar, but secretly saved onions for your mother when she was ill. There won't be statues, no gold-lettered tombstones, but someone will say, "Remember them? They burned bread for 3 years straight and no one dared complain." And someone will laugh, and someone will add to the tale. Then the story will fade, becoming part of the wind, the smoke, the evening lullaby. And you'll understand gently that survival isn't about living forever. It's about leaving something that remains after the final shovel falls. A name, a footprint, or just a warmth in someone's memory as they sit quietly in an unforgiving century. At some point in life, perhaps while sitting alone by a dying hearth, scratching your head with a wooden spoon, pondering whether black pudding is the reason everything tastes a bit sour, you come to a realization. Amidst all the peculiar, perilous, or subtly illicit dishes, one ingredient remains ever present, lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness to infiltrate your life with the nonchalance of an uninvited neighbor who shows up at every feast: the turnip. Not the rosy, charming kind depicted in fairy tales with mice, cats, and old men rolling up their sleeves. Not the thinly sliced, sesame-sprinkled variety drizzled with sesame oil, as seen in those rustic yet Instagrammable meals. The turnip here, the kind that thrives in dry soil, wet soil, rocky soil, even soil enriched by decomposing bodies, is the real deal. The kind that tastes like licking a clay bowl left in the rain for a week, offering a deceptive sense of fullness. Turnips aren't tasty. They never have been. Whether boiled, roasted, stewed, shredded, or fermented to the point of audibility, turnips don't aim to please. They aim to persist. And they always do. When winter claims the last greens, when the chicken coop is raided, when the pig slips and dies mid-dream, when flour molds, when honey is overtaken by ants, when all else is lost, the turnip remains. In the garden corner, beneath the soil, silent, unassuming, unacknowledged, and you eat. Not out of desire, but necessity. Because your stomach doesn't ask, "Is it delicious?" It asks, "Is there anything?" And the turnip responds with a silent, mushy presence and a flavor reminiscent of an overcooked moral lesson. You learn to improvise, add salt, add garlic, add wine, add mushrooms, add fat, add tears. But no matter what you do, a turnip remains a turnip. No one finishes a turnip meal and exclaims, "Wonderful! I feel alive." Usually, people just sigh, lean back, and try to recall the last time they ate something that wasn't a turnip, then realize they can't. Children dislike turnips. Adults dislike turnips. Folk songs don't sing of turnips. Yet every meal includes them. In porridge, in soup, in pies, those pies distinguishable from stones only by their marginal softness after prolonged chewing. Some dream of turnips. Some dream of their absence, then wake in panic thinking, "I must be dead." Turnips have no season. They're ever present, like a lingering melancholy or the forge's groan when the wind howls. As you kneel in prayer, somewhere in the garden, a turnip extends its roots. As you give birth, someone nearby grates turnip for soup. When you die, turnip porridge is prepared for the wake, and someone will say, "They loved this dish," though everyone knows no one does. Thus, you live a life underpinned by turnips, not a tragedy, not a joy, but a constant, like humidity or the weight of a wet woolen coat. You don't thank them. You don't curse them. You simply accept them, as you accept that your rooster might be pregnant, despite being male. Occasionally, you rebel. You change the menu. You hunt rabbits, unsuccessfully. You steal eggs, get caught. You pilfer seeds, get chased. Then you return home, tired, hungry, mud up to your armpits, and find your mother has simmered a pot of turnip stew as vast as karmic retribution. You bow your head, grasp the spoon, sigh, and think, at least it's hot. And in that first spoonful, warm, soft, bland, familiar, and unexpectedly not detestable, you realize that survival doesn't demand grandeur, just something that endures. A root, a bowl, a pot, a bit of warmth, not perfection, just enough to get by. In this unforgiving world, the turnip serves as a gentle reminder, not everyone gets to live their dreams. Some survive on roots growing in clay, on what others discard, forget, or deem nameless. But for you, it's what's left when all else is gone. It doesn't say, "I love you," but it never abandons you. And perhaps someday, someone will recount your life, not through heroic tales, but through the memory of a bubbling pot of turnip stew. And if so, then the turnip isn't so bad after all. You wipe your mouth, not because of grease, but as a final gesture to delay the end, as if through this small act, you can prolong the illusion of meat, of power, of not being the poorest at the table. But eventually, you rise. Wash your hands in cold water, scrub the dishes with rags, and cleanse your memories with a sigh. You know, tomorrow won't bring meat. Maybe next month, maybe next season, but not tomorrow. Tomorrow will be turnips again, or bland porridge, or soup with something you hope is a root and not a former cellar dweller. And you accept it. Not because you don't crave meat, but because you know if you live solely for it, you won't survive. Because meat, like dreams, should appear just enough to keep you plowing, cooking, smiling when someone else catches a whiff and glances at you with that look, that silent question. How did you get that? And you just smile, offering no answer. You smell it before you see it. A wisp of smoke, curling like an unconfessed sin, brushes against your nose, slithers through ash-filled air, and taps gently on the part of your brain that stores everything related to fat, salt, and things you can't have. That smell, warm, thick, full of promise, like an angel in an apron has just passed through the kitchen. But you know very clearly it's not for you. It's the smell of bacon. In the world you live in, where every meal is a prolonged compromise between sorrow and turnips, meat, especially fatty meat, is a symbol of something higher. It's not just food, it's power, sliced thin, slow roasted, and ceremoniously flaunted. The one who has meat is the one who owns a pig. The one who owns a pig is the one who owns land. The one who owns land is the one who can stand in the village square without anyone whispering, "He stole my salt." Bacon is a declaration. It's the voice of those who have their own kitchen, their own roof tiles, their own scent drifting freely without fear of anyone thinking their house is on fire. It smells like, "I've made it," like, "No turnips for me today," like, "Someone else will do the dishes." It's the smell that makes neighbors open their windows wider, just to let the breeze in, while actually trying to steal a whiff of what it feels like to live decently. You don't have meat. Not regularly. Maybe on holidays, when an animal in the pen gets so old it falls into the wall on its own. Maybe when your father trades 3 baskets of mushrooms for a half-gnawed rib. Or when your family gets invited to a wedding, not out of affection but because they needed someone to carry chairs. And when meat appears, thin, trembling, as if it, too, knows it's in the wrong place, you bite it. The fat melts. Salt attacks your tongue like an organized rebellion. Smoke clings to the meat like sealed-off memories. For a few seconds, you're no longer a peasant. You're nobility. You have a seat slightly higher than others. You get to choose the pieces without bones. You'll be remembered not for how you slipped into a puddle, but for how you chewed slowly, like someone who was once a king at a very small feast. but the feeling doesn't last. Because after that comes the bone, the empty plate, the spoon scraping nothing. The silent glances of those beside you, not judgmental, not envious, just quiet, as if to remind you, today it's you, tomorrow it's turnips again. You once dreamed of having a pig, not a big one, just fat enough to make your friends curious. But raising pigs is a risky game. They eat a lot, smell worse, get sick, escape, might talk to ghosts. And if you happen to love it, give it a name, call it every morning, sing it to sleep. Then when the time comes to kill it, you'll stand there, knife in hand, tears falling, thinking, maybe I should have just stuck with mushrooms. So you don't raise one, you buy. But buying meat is also an act of courage. The market doesn't always have it. Meat isn't always fresh, money isn't always enough. And the butcher isn't always sober. He might cut short, forget to weigh, or ramble about the time he accidentally butchered a cat and had to switch to rat control for a while. You return home with your meat wrapped in cloth, not large, but enough for the family to sit around pretending they've eaten. Some days you don't eat, you just sniff. Then you cook. Not to be full, but so that anyone passing by will think your family just won a lawsuit or inherited a fortune. Fat sizzles over fire. The scent spreads like a broadcast with no need for speakers. People passing slow down. Children stop playing. The wind changes direction like it's trying to bring more uninvited guests to the meal you don't want to share. You eat the meat, but you know it'll run out, and the turnips will still be there. You chew slowly, swallow thoroughly. No words, no laughter. Because when the last piece dissolves in your mouth, so do you, returning to an ordinary person, with unwhite teeth, unclean hands, and a long afternoon ahead filled with things that contain no fat. Bacon doesn't keep you full forever, but it reminds you that you once touched something else. Not higher, not further, just different. And in a world of boiling, stewing, rechewing, and sighing, that different, even fleeting, is a kind of miracle. You wipe your mouth. Not because of grease, but because it's the last way to delay the ending. As if with one small gesture you can hold on to the echo of meat, of power, of the feeling that, for a moment, you weren't the poorest person at the table. But then you have to stand. Wash your hands with cold water, your dishes with rag scraps, and your memory with a sigh. You know tomorrow won't have meat. Maybe next month, maybe next season, but not tomorrow. Tomorrow will still be turnips, or thin gruel, or soup made with something you hope is a root and not whatever used to crawl under the cellar. And you accept that. Not because you don't want meat, but because you know, if you live for it, you won't survive. Because meat, like dreams, should appear just enough to keep you plowing, keep you cooking, keep you smiling when someone else smells that scent and turns to look at you with that look, that quiet, curious look that asks, "How did you get that?" And you just smile and say nothing. There are things you assume to be obvious, like drinking water, for instance. That water is just something you pour into a cup, lift to your lips, and let freshness cascade down your throat like an invisible blessing. But that's because you've never lived in the 14th century, where the only safe water to drink was the kind fermented enough to kill bacteria, sadness, and a few otherwise good decisions. Here, water isn't clear, isn't clean, isn't sweet. It doesn't pour from stainless steel taps with filters and cheerful reminders to drink 8 glasses a day. It comes from rivers, wells, puddles after rain, bamboo pipes tilted under thatched roofs. Water carries mud, worm eggs, fly carcasses, half-formed opinions from nature, and sometimes a smell reminiscent of autumn, if autumn had ever tripped into horse dung and been left there. And so people drank ale. Not to get drunk, but to survive. Ale, medieval beer, was not something you bought to chill, sit on a balcony, play jazz, and reminisce about lost love. It was medicine, filtered water, liquid food, and the only reason children didn't die of dehydration in summer. Around here, a 3-year-old might not know letters, but they knew how to hold a cup. And if you think letting kids drink beer is irresponsible, let me remind you The alternative was water that could give your entire village synchronized diarrhea. Beer had no fizz, no chill, no tropical fruit notes. It was a sluggish liquid, cloudy like your mood after arguing with your mother, pungent like an apology delivered too late, and warm, like memories of bad decisions. It was brewed in wooden barrels, stored in clay jars, sometimes with a thin film on top. No one was sure if it was yeast or something else. But no one asked. Asking wasted saliva, and saliva was one of the last sources of clean water in this world. You drank it in the morning, when your stomach had nothing but hope. You drank while working, to forget what it felt like to hold a hoe since 4 a.m. You drank when your teeth hurt, because there was no anesthetic, but there was beer. You drank when you were happy, sad, or just numb, especially when numb, because that's when you worked best. Ale was the one thing everyone agreed on. The rich drank from glazed ceramic mugs. The poor drank from cracked coconut shells. Everyone got equally drunk. Everyone hiccuped the same. Everyone had once vomited in someone else's yard and still been offered cake the next morning because who hasn't? Of course, some people overdid it. There was always the husband who swore just 1 cup every night, only to wake under a cart with an onion in his arms and no clue where he'd found it. There was the monk hiding ale in his preaching room, proclaiming virtue while reeking of fermentation. There was the old woman who drank half a jug every night for better sleep, then spent her days recounting dreams of slapping her father for daring to marry her mother. You tried quitting once, 1 day, 2. On the 3rd day, you drank river water out of desperation, and your stomach started playing drums. Your liver retreated into a defensive position, and your mind returned to the time you ate burnt porridge and thought, this must be rock bottom. Lesson learned. You went back to ale, apologized with trembling but sincere hands. Beer doesn't make you happy. It just slows down the sadness. And in a world where everything happens too fast, seasons lost, pigs dead, chickens mislaid their eggs, mothers lost their patience, slowing down sadness is already a massive improvement. You don't show off your beer. Don't post pictures of it tilted under golden sunsets. You pour it into a chipped wooden bowl, sip it like a whispered apology to your stomach. I'm still trying. And then you drink again, not to forget, but to remember that you're still alive, still here, still have something to sip. People say ale connects. Maybe it does, maybe not. But at the very least, when a stranger hands you a cup of ale, you don't ask their name. You just raise your own cup, clink gently, drink, and nod. Nothing more needed. Because if 2 people can share this murky, pungent liquid without grimacing, maybe they can share other things too. Ash, sorrow, or tomorrow's soup. And when night falls, and you're lying on a straw mat, belly full, head slightly spinning, eyes heavy, you're not thinking about clean water, not thinking about Mediterranean wine, not thinking about the glittery drinks future people will sip with ice and sliced lime. You're just thinking, tomorrow, if I'm still alive, I'll drink less. You say that every night, and never mean it. And sometimes, in the soft moment between 2 gusts of wind, sitting alone by a nearly empty jug of ale, listening to someone outside hum a folk song with no chorus, you realize you've forgotten what real thirst feels like. Because for a long time now, you haven't been drinking to quench it. You've been drinking to delay the truth. That life, though beautiful, is always dry as straw. And sometimes just 1 gulp of murky ale is enough to remind you, you are still human. You raise your cup to the darkness. No one needs to clink back. Foam slides down the rim. Yeast cuts across your worries and your throat. Tired from silence, exhales a soft, yeah, to no one in particular. Just to know you're still here, in this world of ferment and unspoken things. You wake up early with the distinct sensation that a small stone has taken up residence in your mouth overnight and is now demanding citizenship through a stabbing ache. You open your mouth, not to breathe, but to confirm that your right molar has officially resigned. No warning, no notice, just a vague clunk during last night's dinner. And this morning, it feels like a part-time stonemason has moved into your gums and started working overtime uninvited. Teeth, something you once considered as natural as midday sun or a rooster's crow, have become a constant source of worry. Because in the 14th century, teeth aren't tools, teeth are trials. A silent battle between what you want to chew and what you're qualified to chew without losing part of your identity. There are no dentists, no clinics, no reclining chairs, no gentle suction tubes offered kindly to your lips. There's an old man named Joran who used to shoe horses, but after losing a finger to an aggressive mule, decided to switch to a lighter trade, pulling teeth with iron pliers and silent prayers. You visit him when the pain keeps you awake. Not because you trust him, but because you have no other choice. He looks into your mouth as if picking out a melon, nods, then pulls out a tool that looks part fishhook, part demon claw. No anesthesia, no soft cloth, no comforting words. Just, don't bite your tongue. And then he presses down. The pain is like nothing else. It doesn't scream, it whispers, deep and cold, like an ancient chant echoing through bone. You want to scream, but your mouth is busy being torn open. You want to cry, but you used up all your tears last week when you burned the turnip porridge. You only groan, and then, crack, done. A new gap, a different mouth, a small wound inside, and a much bigger emptiness outside. You go home, bite down on herbal leaves to stop the bleeding, and vow never to eat anything hard again. But by noon, your mother bakes stone bread, the kind that requires full cooperation from both jaws, strong willpower, and at least one intact generation of molars. You look at it, it looks back, you chew on the other side, and crack. So you begin learning to live with insufficient teeth. You bite sideways, chew diagonally, eat porridge, soups, drink thick beer, and avoid anything that might convince your jaw to betray you. But teeth aren't just for eating. They're also for smiling. And now, every time you open your mouth, children go quiet as if you've just told a true ghost story. You used to have a smile, now you have a ripple. A little disturbance that makes people tilt their heads, furrow their brows and say, "It's okay," in a tone that makes you feel slightly not okay. And when winter comes, the cold slips into your gums like an uninvited guest carrying ice and quiet disdain. Your teeth ache. They wobble. They throb as if holding secret meetings about mass desertion. You've heard rumors of false teeth, made from wood, stone, even dog teeth. You ask around. People laugh, then tell the story of a man who installed horse teeth and was nearly beaten for being mistaken as a haunted stable ghost. You stop asking. You dream your teeth fall out, one by one, gently, no blood, as if they're leaving you for a better life, where they're respected, polished, photographed. You wake up, hand on your cheek, relieved to find at least 3 left on the left side, still hanging in there. You don't blame your teeth. They've worked hard. They've chewed turnips year after year without filing complaints. They've faced bread as hard as roof tiles, river water as cold as betrayal, and sadness packed into every meal. And if they're tired now, if they're cracking, maybe they're just reclaiming a little freedom. So you laugh less, chew slower, sleep with your mouth slightly open, so your jaw doesn't have to hold shape all night. And in that moment, you understand. Teeth aren't for showcasing perfection, but to remind you that this body, like everything else in this century, will slowly come apart, bit by bit, and you must learn to love each part before it disappears. Sometimes, you see an old man with no teeth left, still eating porridge with a wooden spoon, smiling with his eyes. They say he once had the most beautiful teeth in the village, until someone asked him to prove it by biting a fake coin. The tooth left, but his pride stayed. He still smiles every day, not with his jaw, but with habit. You look at him, then at yourself, then at the bread on the table, hard as a dried bone, and you know you'll get there too. A time will come when you no longer judge food by taste or texture, but by sound. If it doesn't crack, it's a success. In the end, teeth aren't what help you eat well. They're what remind you that you were once young, once reckless, once chewed boldly, once laughed loudly, and once forgot that everything breaks eventually. Not because it's weak, but because it's done everything it could in a world that's never been easy to swallow. You open your eyes in the morning, look down at your feet, and discover something not new. They're still there, clinging to you like two unpaid debts from a past life, calloused, filthy, and slightly resentful, as if they're demanding paid leave after 10 straight years of carrying your body weight with no compensation for sharp stones, cold mud, or goat droppings. You might think feet are the easiest part of the body to care for. They don't need combing, back scratching, or sweet nothings whispered into them at night. But you forget one crucial fact: you walk on them. And you don't live in a world of carpets or polished tile. You live in the 14th century, where the main village road is a blend of soil, rocks, urine, and fragments of poor life choices. And so you realize, shoes aren't accessories. Shoes are ideas, dreams, a shared belief in a better future, one where people don't have to press leaves against their heels every evening. You don't have shoes, you have wrapped cloth, sometimes not even cloth. Just hope, hardened souls, and the ability to walk across the earth as if dancing with ancient curses. The rich have shoes, soft shoes, sewn shoes, shoes made from tanned leather, tied with waxed cords, stitched with care, and, most importantly, not meant to go far. They walk from house to courtyard, from courtyard to carriage, from carriage to banquet hall. The entire lifespan of their shoes never touches anything that could be called sharp rock or unlabeled mud. Their shoes don't live, they're preserved. And you have feet, bare, thickening each day like a forgotten book in the rainy season. Your calluses are hard enough to spark a fire if needed. Your heels are cracked like drought fields. Toenails, you don't talk about toenails. Every time you stub a toe, even lightly, you imagine somewhere in the universe someone else just felt the exact same pain, because fairness demands a witness. In winter, your feet get so cold you bury them in ashes. Not because you want to, but because it's the only way to avoid waking up at 2 a.m. to check if your big toe is still attached. In summer, the ground gets so hot that every step becomes an existential question. Do I really need to go there? And unless the answer is there's food, you seriously consider not going. You once dreamed of owning shoes, the kind with soles, with laces, with a shape that quietly says, whoever wears these probably doesn't worry about breaking a toenail on a dried onion. But shoes are expensive, far. They require leather. Leather needs cattle. Cattle need barns. Barns need land. Land needs money. And you have turnips. So you keep walking. No soles, no insurance, no warranty. Just 2 feet that resemble archaeological tools more than living flesh. On holidays, you might borrow shoes. They don't fit. Too stiff. Smell strange. But you wear them, walking stiffly like you're starring in a play titled, "Behold, I am a man with shoes." Others look at you with performative respect. You look at them with genuine pain. At the end of the day, you take the shoes off. Steam rises like a liberated spirit. Your feet are red, swollen, and seem ready to file for permanent barefoot status. But you don't give up. You get creative. You use bark, tie rags, line them with dry grass. One day you even strap old pot lids to your feet with vines, walking down the road like you're testing a revolutionary anti-fashion weapon. People laugh. You don't. You're busy counting steps, estimating when the pot lid will finally snap. You learn to distinguish mud by feel. Warm mud, cold mud, gravelly mud, mud with a dark past. You tread lightly on pebbles, firmly over trash, leap over fire pits, and avoid puddles the color of leftover vegetable broth. Every day is a lesson in gravity and surrender. And through it all, you keep walking. To the fields, to the market, to the church, to funerals, to places the rich glide to in silence, while you carry every step with pain, determination, and faith that when you die, you'll at least be buried with a sock. Even just one. Sometimes you think, if you had one wish, just one, you wouldn't ask for gold, a house, or fame. You'd ask for shoes that fit. Not new, not beautiful. Just ones that don't make your big toe curl over your second toe like two best friends clinging to a single cot in winter. And if you told someone this wish, they wouldn't laugh, because everyone understands. Feet are unpaid workers. They get no praise, no lyrics in songs, no poetic odes like eyes or hair. But if they left you one day, you'd realize you haven't been living, you've just been standing still. So you keep walking. Sharp rocks, cold rain, slippery roads, aching bones, still you walk. Because shoes are rare, but reasons to keep walking? Those come every single day. You sit there by the dying fire, looking down at your hands, rough, darkened, with nail beds that seem to hold the agricultural history of an entire season. And you suddenly remember, it's been 5 days since you last thought about washing them. And even then, it was only a thought. Because the water's cold, because the water's dirty, because there's no soap, because no one else is doing it, and because honestly, what's the point? In the 14th century, personal hygiene isn't a habit. It's an ideal. A symbol for people who own more than 2 shirts, live near a stream not polluted by dead rats, and have enough free time to distinguish between human scent and yeast fermenting in the sleeve. You don't have soap, you have ash, sometimes sand. Occasionally water boiled with some kind of tree bark. Someone swears, "Works great. My grandmother was born clean because of it." And so you scrub, not to be clean, but because someone's watching. Bathing? A dream. A luxury. A game of chicken between your body and water temperatures that make your heart question whether life is worth it. You don't have a tub. Sometimes not even water. Just a bucket, a bit of yard, and a fence low enough that if someone walks by, they'll know you're naked. But at least there's wind. You don't bathe daily. Not weekly. Sometimes not even monthly. One year you remember winter arrived too quickly, and you didn't get your final summer wash, so you reconsider the entire concept of Saturday cleansing. Body odor isn't a problem, it's a measurement. Strong smell? You're healthy. Pungent? You've been working hard. Weird? You probably ate something you shouldn't have, but no one judges, because everyone smells the same. In church, people aren't praying for their sins. They're praying to survive the smell of the person beside them. You've tried cleaning yourself, dipped cloth in warm water, wiped each finger. It didn't feel bad. But 5 minutes later, you had to gather firewood, lead the cow, bake bread, and the whole cleansing effort evaporated like last year's crop hope. You've heard rumors of people using dried flowers, scented leaves, herbal oils, but that person lives on a hill, never leaves their house, and everyone suspects he's either a witch or a poet. You let go of that hope. Instead, you invent a multi-purpose rag for face, hands, pots, maybe even babies. A deodorizing cloak, meaning it's so old, no one dares sniff it. And the wind wash technique, stand outdoors, arms wide, and hope nature handles the rest. One day it rains. You strip, run into the yard. The ground is cold, the rain is sharp, your belly tightens, but you feel alive. Each drop like a gentle slap from God, a reminder. See, you can be clean if you're willing to suffer a little. You bathe, in the rain, shivering, no soap, but your soul smells fresh. Then you return inside, wet, cold, shivering, and immediately get covered in stove ash, grease from the pan, and spilled turnip water. Everything goes back to normal, but you're not sad. Because at least you tried. You start to love the small things, a truly dry towel, a set of clothes not yet touched by mud, a night without flea bites. And when you dream, not wildly, just modestly, you dream of a basin filled with warm water, no dead leaves, no floating insects. You wake up smiling, thinking, maybe next life. You don't criticize others for being dirty. You just take one step back, not out of scorn, out of scent. You understand them. They are you. We are all living in a world where cleanliness is a rare condition, like roasted meat, shoes with soles, or windless days. Rare, but not impossible. And then, sometimes, you meet someone who smells different. Not fragrant, just less. You ask what they use. They smile. Say nothing. You nod. Don't ask again. Because in this world, the secret to staying clean is more sacred than a bread recipe that doesn't burn. You once heard of a communal village bath, an event so rare it's remembered in legend. It rained for 3 days straight, the pond overflowed, and the village elder declared, "We shall do what our ancestors never dreamed of." People hesitated, looked at each other, undressed, stepped in. There was laughter, splashing, a few small screams when someone saw a leech. And in that moment, the whole village smelled good. Not like perfume, but like hope. Ever since then, when the rain falls long, you open the door, look up, and wonder if you dare recreate that miracle, or just continue living with the dust, the smoke, and the memory of once being clean. And then you fold your unwashed shirt, hang it on the beam, wash your hands in the wind, and whisper, "Tomorrow I'll bathe." You say it every night, and like everyone else, you never mean it. Night falls, not the poetic kind you read in books, with silver moonlight bathing thatched roofs and crickets chirping like a French film soundtrack, but the kind of night that feels like a wet blanket just got dumped over the entire village. Heavy, cold, and smelling vaguely of overboiled turnips. You lie down on what you still call a bed, although structurally, in terms of support and the scent it emits when you shift your weight, it's more of a straw-based punishment than a place for rest. Your only blanket is your father's old coat, the kind thick enough to block a light breeze but no match for the delicate infiltration of rain seeping through the thatch, decaying like the ethics of a shady wine merchant. You close your eyes and exhale. The wind whistles through the cracks in the door like an uninvited cousin who shows up anyway, bringing a little dust, a bit of kitchen smoke, and a subtle sense that something is crawling under the mat. You don't move. You know the rules. If you stay still, it might think you're a piece of wood and leave. If you kick it, it might retaliate. If you get up to check, you'll be awake until dawn, and tomorrow you'll have to plow fields with the hollow-eyed stare of someone who visited dreams but wasn't allowed to stay. You stay still, silent, tense. Then you hear it, a soft rustle, small, slow, patient, as if whatever it is, mouse, bug, or the ghost of a moldy loaf, is testing whether you're worth gnawing on. You pull the coat tighter around you, not out of fear, but out of hope that the accumulated sweat might drive it away in search of a more pleasant meal. You close your eyes again, trying to sleep. You think of gentle things, like a windless day, a lunch with meat, or a pillow not made from a sack that once stored damp firewood. But instead of taking you to flower fields, your mind leads you to the ceiling, where a small hole drips water onto your nose, drop by drop. Drip, drip, drip. Like the ticking of a clock, if time were measured in moisture. You turn over, searching for a drier spot. But the driest area is near the bed's edge, where if you doze off, you might wake up with one foot on the ground and one hand touching, something you shouldn't. You lie on your side, arm as a pillow, and wait for sleep like someone waiting for a horse cart in the rain, unsure, unexcited, but with no better option. Outside, a dog barks, then it stops. You're not sure which is worse. Sometimes you hear footsteps, soft, slow. Could be someone walking at night. Could be imagined sounds conjured by a brain too used to sleeping without really resting. You open your eyes. Everything is still dark. You close them again. But in that darkness, you know, you're not alone. You never really are. You have bugs. You have rats. You have the wind. You have the cold lurking. You have the faint breath of your mother in the corner of the room, the same breath you've heard every night since memory began. like a lullaby without tune, without words, just persistent existence. And then you feel warmth, not from the blanket, not from the fire's long dead, but from exhaustion, the thickest blanket humankind has ever known. Fatigue is what helps you forget the dripping, forget the itch of dry straw, forget the vague suspicion that you might wake up with a strange bite on your ankle. You sleep, not deeply, not beautifully, but you sleep. And in that sleep, among straw, smoke, breathing, wind, and dripping, you dream a dream. That the roof doesn't leak, the mat doesn't poke, and the night brings nothing but peace. A dream that isn't real, but just enough to help you go on and dream again tomorrow. And if you're lucky, you won't be woken in the night by someone's dry cough, one of those long, brittle sounds like a fraying string between life and something colder than morning breath. You roll over, pretend not to hear. Not out of apathy, but because you know that if you got up, you wouldn't be able to do anything but sit and hope that cough doesn't turn into silence. You curl your legs in, burrow deeper into the coat, and inhale your own body's scent. Not worse than usual, not better, but familiar like a memory blanket. Damp, slightly singed, vaguely alive. Outside, the wind shifts. The thatch groans again. The wind snakes through the walls like a hungry cat looking for a crack. And you wonder, if you were the wind, would you stop by this house? Probably not, but you're not the wind. You're human, a tired one, lying down, waiting for morning, holding on to each minute of sleep like clutching a handful of beans in midwinter. And in that hazy space between waking and dreaming, you whisper into the night, not to anyone, not expecting a reply, just a familiar phrase, just make it through tonight. And the night, like a cold old woman, doesn't answer, but neither does she refuse. Early morning. You haven't opened your eyes yet, but you already know they're there. The neighbors. You don't need to look, you don't need to hear, you just feel it. That faint warmth between your temples when someone's staring at you through the straw wall like your pig pen is the only entertainment within a 3-mile radius. You sit up, adjust your tunic, step outside to the familiar creak of the wooden door, and there stands Bertha, one hand on her hip, the other holding a basket of eggs, her eyes like pre-scientific x-rays, scanning you as if your existence is the reason her cow didn't give birth yesterday. You nod. She nods back. But it's not a good morning nod. It's a, I know you burned something last night. The smoke came into my house and I'm not forgetting. Nod. You smile, not because you're happy, but because it's a survival reflex when living near someone who can offer you bread on Monday and curse you with wilted herbs by Tuesday. Neighbors in this century aren't just next door. They're extensions of your family. Not voluntarily, not comfortably, but definitely physically close. So close they know how many times you go to the toilet each day, based on the volume and number of footsteps from the main house to the back hedge. They know you argued with your wife yesterday. They know you cursed at your cow the day before. They know your laundry line was hung slightly crooked, and may remind you of it 3 days later during a pretend friendly village gathering. No walls, no soundproof fences, no concept of privacy. You sneeze, the village knows. You snore, the village discusses it. You grow cabbage and bugs eat it. Someone will come show you how to use ash to kill them, and that afternoon 5 others will stop by just to say, "Heard your cabbage is doomed this year, huh?" Every day is a broadcast. There's no newspaper, but there's Gutilda, who knows everything, remembers everything, and retells everything, with details edited more finely than reality itself. She's equal parts eyewitness and fiction author, and you're no longer sure where one ends and the other begins. You once dreamed of living alone, far from the village, far from people, far from the question, "What did you eat this morning?" Smells familiar. But then you remember, being alone means chasing off thieves alone, driving off foxes alone, digging latrines alone. And so you return to them. To the glances, to the advice you didn't ask for, to the veiled suggestions that maybe it's time for a haircut. Of course, there are upsides. When you're sick, someone brings porridge. When you fall, someone helps you up. When you lose a cow, someone points you in the right direction. When you lose your temper, someone loses it on your behalf and retells it with cinematic flair. And when you're happy, like the time you caught the biggest rat ever in your grain shed, you just shout, "Got it!" And 5 people show up instantly as if they'd always been there, waiting for the awards ceremony for Rodent Vanquisher of the Year. Occasionally, there's conflict. Someone's chickens wander into someone else's yard. Someone talks too loudly during nap hour. Someone roasts meat on a Friday, which Elsa sees as a religious insult. But you don't fight. You can't. Because if you do, the next morning you won't have anyone to borrow a sickle from, no one to watch your cow, and no one who knows how to boil turnips without turning them into sticky mystery paste. You endure as they endure you. Like a treaty that was never signed, only nodded at, through rainy seasons, dry seasons, and the season of, "I wasn't eavesdropping, the walls are just thin." You once asked your mother how to live peacefully with neighbors. She just smiled, handed you a cake, and told you to bring it to the old man at the village edge. You didn't like him, but you went. Because your mother understood, sometimes peace doesn't come from empathy, but from giving people reasons not to punch you today. And at night, as you lie there listening to wind, cow sounds, and Guthilda coughing twice before falling silent, you feel calm. Not because you're alone, but because you can't be alone. Not when one wall over, someone is snoring, a cat is mewling, and a familiar voice whispers, "He forgot to latch the door again." The next morning, you step into your yard and find your hen wandering casually across the neighbor's plot. You walk over to call it back. But before you can speak, Bertha emerges, arms crossed. She chose to be here. And you, knowing there's no legal code to counter that, just scratch your head, already strategizing your negotiation, while children behind you shout, "Traitor chicken! Traitor chicken!" And that's the beautiful and horrible thing about medieval neighbors. No one is alone. But no one gets to forget they're living among people with ears, eyes, great memory, and way too much free time to remember what you wish they wouldn't. Yet when evening comes, and you scoop a bowl of hot porridge, and someone knocks lightly at your door, "Smells good. Can I trade a bit for an egg tomorrow?" You smile, not because of the deal, but because you know that, somewhere in the distant future, someone will call this kind of thing community engagement. You wake up and you don't know what season it is, not because you've lost your memory, but because the 14th century doesn't define seasons by calendars, it defines them by the intensity of suffering. Some days in mid-June it snows, like someone in the sky dumped an entire sack of flour on your head. Some days in the dead of winter, the sun peeks out for an hour, and then disappears like nature's awkward apology. Just kidding. You don't have weather forecasts, you have knees. When they ache, it means rain. When they throb, cold wind is coming. When they itch and burn, something bizarre is on the way. You just don't know if it'll be fog, hail, or a sunlight so fake it feels like being smiled at by someone who owes you money. Spring doesn't arrive with birdsong. It arrives with coughing, yours, your mother's, and your pig's, which doesn't understand why its feeding trough is encased in snow. Trees bud, but any vegetable growth is trampled instantly by someone hauling water through cold mud in old leather shoes. Shoes that leak, slide, and smell like a public bathhouse without the bath. Summer bears no resemblance to anything you once learned. It might be hot, might be cold, might rain non-stop for 6 days, then scald for 2 hours, then flash flood. You wash your shirt and hang it up, sun comes out, you celebrate. 3 minutes later, sky cracks open. You swear you hear it. Giggle. Softly. But still. Autumn is a scam. The leaves fall prettily, then too many fall, and you slip in the backyard and wonder if romance just punched you. The sky clears, the breeze is gentle, but this morning you had to remove 3 frozen mouse corpses from the firewood pile, which may or may not be related, but you feel personally attacked. And then winter. Oh, winter. It arrives like an old enemy, doesn't knock, doesn't warn, just slips through the wall, bites your ankle the moment you take off your shoes, and settles in like it's always lived there. Turnips freeze, pillows frost, your nose bleeds from the cold air, and when you try mouth breathing, you inhale smoke from the stove and cough like you're exorcising a demon instead of reheating porridge. And still, you must go to the fields. Reap in fog, plow in the wind, shovel manure in hail, because if you don't, you go hungry. And if you go hungry, you get weak. And if you get weak, you won't survive until spring pretends to return. You once heard tales of the southern lands, where the sun is gentle, the winds are kind, the rain falls on schedule, and plants grow unprovoked. You think it's either heaven or a lie from a bored traveler hoping for a free dinner. Either way, you've never seen it. And sometimes you think, maybe it exists, but not for you. You learn to layer 3 shirts, damp inner, coarse middle, and mildewed outer. You learn to slant your roof so rainwater runs off properly, until the roof collapses. You learn to thank the sun, though it appears only 3 times a month, like an ex apologizing, and you, pathetically, forgive. At night, you look out the door, see the fog roll in, the wind curl around you, and the earth gleam like an oversteamed cake. You smack your lips, not because you're surprised, but because you're used to it. You've tried praying, lighting candles, singing lullabies to the wind, hanging herbs, but the result is always the same. The weather does what it wants. It doesn't hate you, it just doesn't care. And you, a small human, can only carry on. One more layer, one more plank on the roof, one more bundle of firewood. Some days the sun stays. It burns. Fields crack, cows go lazy, people drag their feet. Someone says, "Drought is the gods testing us." You say nothing. You silently remember the flood from 3 months ago and wonder if the gods have mood swings. And in the chaos of wind, rain, thunder, frost, and sun, you endure. You sweep water out of your house every morning. You re-dry your clothes every afternoon. You breathe onto your cracked hands, cursing the wind softly while also thanking it for not bringing hail this time. You can't control the weather. You can't understand it. But you've learned to live with it, like a terrible roommate. Messy, disruptive. But you can't kick them out because they pay rent in lightning bolts. And then there are days with no clear weather. No sun, no rain, no wind. Just a blurry sky like thin porridge mixed with chimney smoke hanging above your head. The kind of weather where you don't know what to wear, whether to plant seeds or crawl into bed, whether to pray or swear. You stand in the yard, hoe in hand, your mind tangled like a straw pile chewed by mice, and then you decide to make turnip soup. Because what else is there to do in weather that feels like a story abandoned halfway? You once believed weather followed the seasons. Now you know it's the seasons that follow the weather. And the weather follows moods. Not yours, but the moods of some higher force who changes its mind like a child tired of coloring a new map of humanity. You are just the ink splatter that landed outside the lines. And when night comes and you lie listening to the seasons shift like an orchestra with no conductor, cobbled together from falling rain, creaking roofs, and your stomach quietly rumbling from too much boiled turnip, you sigh, not out of despair, but because you know tomorrow will bring a new kind of weather. And you, of course, will still have to go to the fields. Rain or shine, thunder or fog, you still have to live. And wear your straw hat. You sneeze, just once. Small, but enough for everyone in the house to turn their heads, as if you just knocked on the gates of the underworld and politely said, "Oops, wrong door." No one says anything, but their eyes, part concern, part calculation, are quietly estimating where in the yard they should start digging a hole, preferably upwind. In this century, illness isn't an inconvenience, it's a warning. A wink from death himself, the figure standing just behind you, arms folded, watching to see how you handle that wheezing cough before deciding whether or not to swing the scythe. You try to ignore it. Drink hot water, chew on roots, pray to a saint whose name you don't really know. And when that doesn't help, you do what everyone else does. You sit still, stare into nothing, and wait. Wait to see if the headache becomes a fever. Wait to see if the fever becomes delirium. Wait to see who will be the first to whisper with ceremonial gravity. Perhaps we should call the priest. Medicine in this time isn't really med or science. It's a string of half-faithful experiments involving wooden spoons, bird blood, cold ashes, and bold guessing. One healer swears wearing a dried chicken foot around your neck wards off sickness. Another claims disease comes from toxic vapors in dirty soil, a sound hypothesis, considering 90% of the village lives on it. You lie there, under a blanket, by which we mean a thicker than usual piece of cloth that smells like an old army tent from a war no one remembers. And you try to breathe. Every breath is a negotiation. Between your chest and the cold air. Between dry coughing and keeping quiet so no one panics. Your mother boils water, drops in an onion, a few garlic cloves, a pinch of hope, and a silent prayer. She says nothing. But you know, if the porridge doesn't work, she'll try leaves, then warm dirt, then sprinkle salt on your forehead. Not in order, just according to instinct and tales passed down by people who no longer are. You once heard a story about someone who recovered just by getting enough sleep, but you don't believe it. Not because you don't sleep, but because you know, if rest alone could cure illness, death would be out of work. People don't fear illness because of pain. They fear what comes after. Once a patient lies still long enough, people begin to ask, did he leave any last words? Then, do we still have a usable coffin plank? And finally, is the priest in town, or will we have to wait 3 more days? You're not dead, but you're not allowed to live normally either. You're isolated, not by a room, but by a chair placed as far from the fire as possible. No one comes close, not out of hatred, but because everyone has lost someone to a little cough, and everyone knows it's better to stay away, even if the heart aches to come closer. You stare at the ceiling, listen to the wind, count the cracks in the wood. Each fevered night lasts longer than a year, and every morning you wake up still breathing is a quiet victory. No celebration, but everyone notices. There are moments you nearly give up. Your body falters, your breath shortens, your eyes see shapes they shouldn't. You hear voices, you don't know whose, but then your mother places her hand on your forehead. No words, just presence, as if she's saying, if you must go, you won't go alone. And somehow, you don't go. The next morning you wake, your head still heavy, but you're hungry. And wanting food means you're alive. You drag yourself to the door, sit on the wooden step, watch the cat licking its fur, watch sunlight slant through the mist, and you smile. Not because the sickness is gone, but because there's still a day left to be sick again, if necessary. You don't ask what the illness was. No one diagnoses, no one prescribes. There's just you, time, and a healthcare system powered by patience. A few onions, and your body's ability to fight off death like settling an unpaid debt. And from that day on, whenever someone coughs, you don't laugh. You hand them ginger tea. You don't believe it cures anything. But you remember, someone once gave you something warm when you were cold enough to think your heart might freeze. After that, you start paying closer attention to the coughs in the village. There's the dry cough from smoke. The phlegmy cough from the cold. The broken, ragged cough from elders, usually accompanied by eyes that have accepted what's coming. And then the faint, clipped cough that goes silent. That's the one that makes everyone stop eating, glance at each other, then slowly set down their spoons and take a deep breath, as if trying to inhale whatever life is left in the room. You learn to diagnose not with sight, but with instinct. You know when someone is sick with a "they'll be fine" cough, and when it's the maybe start writing things down kind. And you know, around here, nothing is certain except death and turnips. Sometimes you still dream of your mother's hand on your forehead. Not cold, not hot, just warm enough to remind you that while your body fights alone, you are not alone. And maybe, just maybe, that's the one part of medieval medicine that actually works. A hand placed on a fevered brow. It won't cure you, but it might be enough to keep you going. One more day. You sit in front of the fire, not because you want to, but because you have to. In this century, fire isn't a cozy aesthetic like in noblemen's paintings. It's the fragile line between surviving and freezing, between porridge and raw turnips, between a tolerable evening and one with no tomorrow. Fire is your friend, when it burns in the right place, at the right time, with the right intensity. And it's your enemy, when it hisses suddenly like a spiteful whisper on the wind, licking your thatched roof just because you forgot to say something nice to it today. You used to think fire was easy to control, just flint, wood, and patience. Then you grew up, learned to light damp wood in the rain, learned to blow air just right so the smoke doesn't choke you but the flame still catches. Learn to sit still for 20 minutes staring at a glowing ember like you're trying to communicate telepathically with a creature that might feed you or kill you depending on its mood. Every family has its own fire-keeping method. Yours stores embers in ash overnight, a generational trick and also a form of sleep sacrifice. You've woken many nights just to check the hearth, peered in and seen only cold black, and whispered, "Oh no," with your eyes, because everyone else is asleep. And you're not brave enough to wake them with despair. Fire, when alive, smells like smoke. But when it's dying, it smells like half-burnt fabric, that warning scent that tells you, either add wood or prepare to shiver. There is no third option. You have a cousin who once tried to pour leftover fat into the fire to make it burn faster. He no longer has eyebrows. But ever since, the village children have learned a new lesson about limits, and a new definition for creative decision. No one's angry at him. It's just that, from then on, no one lets him near a fire. Even when it's so cold, the water in the bucket turns solid. Fire isn't just for warmth. It's for cooking, for drying clothes, for smoking out rats, for keeping bears away from pig pens, if you live close enough to the woods to worry about that. And sometimes, it's just for looking. Watching it burn, like listening to a wordless song, a dangerous dance, a reminder that even if you're poor, hungry, and filthy, you still have light. And because of that, you never take your eyes off it. Because all it takes is one spark, a sharp pop from damp wood, and everything becomes ash. And in your village, ash isn't symbolic rebirth. Ash means starting over, with nothing left to start with. They tell stories of great fires. One kitchen, one rooftop, a row of houses downwind. Someone lost a cow. Someone lost a husband. Someone lost the will to laugh for the rest of winter. And it all began with one ember. Like most big things do. You're careful, very careful, but you're also tired. And tired makes you careless. So sometimes, you wake in the night to strange light. Not sun, not moon, but fire licking the edge of the wooden floor. You leap up, stamp, stomp, smother, scramble. When it's finally out, you sit there, cold sweat, and wonder, should I relight it in the morning, or just shiver to stay safe? You relight it, of course, because cold is worse than fire. Cold is a slow death. Fire, at least, is decisive. Sometimes you stare at the glowing logs and wonder, did your ancestors sit like this too? Warming, fearing, relighting whenever fire pouted. And you feel a strange connection, not by blood, but by the fragile thread of life that depends on fire to prove you're still here. And so, you continue. Take shifts tending the flame. Remind your family, don't wave your sleeves near the hearth. Tell the children, no running by the burning logs. Hang a water bucket near the stove, a prayer in physical form. Unsaid but understood. Fire, though temperamental, is still your friend. Without it, you're cold. Without it, you're hungry. Without it, you're in the dark. Not poetically, but the kind of dark where you pee at night and step on a cat. You know you'll get minor burns again. You'll drop a flaming log again. You'll shout again for someone to bring water when the grease spatters up the wall. But you also know you'll sit here again every night, watching the flames dance, breathing out, whispering, "Just tonight. Burn well." Sometimes you wonder, if you got to choose an element to reincarnate as, would you choose fire? You think about it, then shake your head. Because to be fire means everyone wants to be near you, but no one dares touch you. They need you, light you, lean on you, but also fear you, blame you, and curse you when things go wrong. You exist to serve, and the moment you exceed your purpose, you're disaster. Maybe being human is still better. You look at the fire softly breathing in the hearth, orange-red like the heart of some ancient beast, and feel a strange comfort. Out there, the world is cold, dirty, chaotic. But in here, you still have a flame. And as long as it burns, you're not giving up. Even if it's just a spark. Even if it's just a faint, flickering glow. It's enough to believe that tonight, you'll survive. And then night arrives. Not loudly, not suddenly, just quietly. Like a cold blanket gently laid over your shoulders by an invisible hand. No questions asked, no permission sought, just present, as it has been every other evening of your life, ever since you learned that making it to the end of the day was a victory. You sit still, back against the wall, arms wrapped around your knees. The smell of the hearth lingers in your clothes, mixed with the scent of soil, sweat, and burnt popcorn by the stove. No one knew it was popcorn until they smelled it closely, and even then, they weren't sure. The children in the village are asleep. The adults are starting to go quiet too. Only the wind remains. The creaking of bamboo doors, and the light steps of mice, like the whispers of hunger that never sleep. You breathe out. Not because you're no longer tired, but because you don't have the strength to breathe in properly anymore. A shallow, lazy, and slow breath, like you. You didn't starve today. You weren't blown off the roof. You didn't step into the waste pit by mistake. You didn't burn the house down lighting the fire. You didn't fight the neighbor, even though they deserved it. You didn't lose the chicken. You remembered to bring in firewood. You remembered to put out the fire. You soothed the feverish child. You resharpened the blunt knife. You washed your hands with cold water and blind faith. And you survived another day in a world where the bed is a softened log, the blanket a reused sack, and sleep is a luxury that only arrives when you're too exhausted to worry anymore. You lie down, no pillow. Your head rests on a bundle of dry straw that seems free of thorns. Arms around your stomach, not full but not empty. You manage some leftover turnip porridge. Your legs curl up, not from the cold, but because the house is too small, the bed too short, and life always demands you bend just enough not to break. You hear someone cough next door. A low cough, sounds safe. You're relieved it wasn't you. Then you hear someone scolding the chickens. Then the chickens cluck in protest. Then silence. The chickens sleep. The people sleep. Only you lie awake staring at the ceiling, where rain has stained the thatch in the shape of a melting rabbit. You used to dream. Everyone did. Some dreamed of being monks. Some dreamed of knighthood. You dreamed of a blanket without holes, a bowl without chips, a dinner with pie, the kind with filling. A day where you didn't have to go anywhere, dig anything, patch anything, or answer, "Have you eaten?" with a sigh. You dreamed, and then you woke up. And learned to live in reality, where pies come only on holy days, blankets always have holes, bowls are always chipped, and doing nothing is something that only happens after death, if you're lucky. At your feet, a pair of worn shoes. Beside you, a wooden spoon. Above your head, a leaky thatched roof. And in your heart, strangely enough, peace. A kind of peace that doesn't come from having enough, but from realizing, at least today wasn't the worst. You think about tomorrow morning. About waking up early to tend the fire. About breaking ice off the water jar. about scraping ash from the pot, about checking if there are any turnips not yet spoiled, about how tomorrow is market day, maybe you'll be able to trade for some salt, about needing to patch your shirt, about where the cat has run off to again, about the fact that you're still alive. And that, right there, is the highlight of the day. Not joy, not hope, but a simple, stubborn truth. You're still here, still breathing, still with a heart, even if it beats slowly. It hasn't stopped. And somehow, you're still human. Not the clean, fragrant, well-fed, poetic kind, but a real human. Dirty, cold, sore-backed, full of chores, garlicky, sleep-deprived, prone to coughing, a little bitter, but still capable of smiling when the wind changes direction, and still able to see the strange beauty in the faint glow of embers at midnight. You blink. Once. Twice. Then stop. That's it. The day is over. And you survived. One more day. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. It might rain. The chicken coop might collapse. Someone in the village might slip and fall into a boiling soup pot. You might have to dig the well again because the water now smells like something you'd rather not name. But that doesn't matter right now. Because in that moment between wakefulness and dreams, that moment when your mind starts to drift like a straw boat floating down a stream of thin turnip broth, you're not thinking about anything. Not winter, not storms, not firewood, not taxes, not the ones who left, the ones who stayed, or the ones who won't return. You just think, I made it. And that's true. No one can take that from you. Not the priest, not the Lord, not the tax ledger, not a single cruel wind. You, a person living among straw, ashes, and complaints, pulled yourself through another day of thorns and drizzle like dragging a broken-handled sack of potatoes, slowly, heavily, but without spilling. You lie there, like part of the room itself, like a soft breath in a house with no insulation, like a sigh no one needs to hear, and you gently close your eyes. This time, for real. And now, as you've followed us through every imagined slice of bread, every uncertain piece of meat, every tear-drenched drop of honey, and every silent glance at a dried-up turnip, allow yourself to let go, to let the sounds in your mind slow down, settle, and fade like the last warmth lingering in a cold pot. You didn't get to eat the bread, but you told the story, you laughed, you breathed, and you survived another day in history, where food wasn't something to savor, but something to endure with yourself. You've come with me all the way to this moment, and that, you know, is a victory. Thank you for listening, for not leaving when I mentioned turnips for the 12th time, and for understanding that sometimes, the only way to keep going is to laugh gently at your own hunger. If you've enjoyed this strange little journey, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, what time it is, and whether you too are curled up on a mattress of questionable age, just like the one I'm imagining now. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey, because there are still many nights, many turnips, and many winter coughs waiting ahead. And now, close your eyes. Don't worry about the wind. Don't mind the fire. Don't let the sound of mice bother you anymore. You've survived a day in the Middle Ages. You'll survive tonight too. Slow down. Breathe out. Be still. I'll be here. Always here. Good night.